Okay, well, as we go along, you can interrupt and speak anytime. Feel free to say anything and uh, ask questions and interrupt. So the PCP Academy uh, was born out of the Center for Study of the Person, that now it's a Center for Study of the Person Global. Uh, and it has been very rewarding to have this experience with so many people that we had over the years. You know, first we started in person, but with the COVID-19, we had to move it online. So that was quite a change for us. And since then, the Zoom have developed and evolved so much, and we hope that it continues evolving. So uh, it's very inspiring to meet so many people from uh, all over the world, India, China, Russia, you know, and Europe. There are many people that participate in our courses from Europe. So it has been very interesting to understand how the person-centered approach can bridge, I believe, the gap between cultures and people. And Roger was very inspiring to me. You know, I, in a stroke of luck, I met Rogers, you know, I think maybe 6 years or 10 years before he died, you know, and was a great learning for me, not only professional, but a personal learning to be at the center of instead of the person at that time, which with Rogers present was very exciting, very inspiring. We had all kinds of different people there who inspired us, including I remember a presentation that Gendlin gave at the center. And at that time, I had an opportunity to interview him for my doctoral dissertation that became my book and Magical Moments. So it has been for me a very important part of my life. The person-centered approach has a lot of meaning in my life and how I develop myself. So what we would like, and we always think about our courses as the first thing is we'd like people to have an outstanding experience, where we can provide an environment that people can study, teach, learn, because we are all teachers. We all know a lot of people here know a lot about the person-centered approach. So that's very important to experience, for us, the power of the approach with our clients, with our students, and with people who are interested in it. And I think it's very important to understand, for me, I'm talking to me now, what therapy really is. Therapy is a process. Therapy is an encounter where if the client get inspired, then he can change, because nobody can change anyone. You know, we can inspire them to change, you know, but as inside the person-centered approach, we know that the client has a tremendous power in their movement towards change.
Mhm.
You know. And that was really a very important contribution of Rogers as a founder of humanist psychology when there was a change in the directions of psychotherapy at that time. I think that's a very important aspect of psychotherapy. In reality, psychotherapy to me is about being there, being present, being with the client, and allowing your creativity, your wisdom to, I don't like the word penetrating the relationship, but being in the relationship with your client. There is no way of right or wrong of doing therapy. For your way of doing therapy through the person-centered psychotherapy. I believe therapy is not a place for spiritual, social, political conversion. I think therapy is about psychological, mental, behavioral changes and growth, which is one of the things that Rogers brought to therapy, is that we are in therapy not to label our clients, not to uh, not to teach them anything, but to help them to uncover their own lives, the richness that they have within themselves, and that they can change, that can move. You know. And therapists, uh, according to our understanding, need to be working on themselves. Because as Roger said, one of the conditions for therapy is that the therapist at least has to be a little more congruent,
Mhm.
you know, so that there is an impact on what's going on. You know. Because in the end, what we want to achieve in therapy is that the client get inspired and get more congruent in their lives so that they can be more participate in their lives. You know. So therapy is not only about treating anxiety, depression, but it's about uncovering the richness of each client that comes to you, which is different. And this is not easy because in the way of doing therapy in the person-centered approach, you as a therapist, you are a participant. And that requires a lot of questioning your own beliefs, your own ideas, your own thoughts about life, and not trying to impose on the other one what you believe, what your values are, you know, what is life. I had a client yesterday, and the client said, "Oh, he's gay, and he was going out with a trans woman." And the therapist according to him, felt very threatened by that, saying that, "Oh, I know you really like women," you know. And he was so appalled by that. He was so uh, set back on his ways of exploring the world. He was just exploring the world, you know, to many possibilities that we have. And it's not easy just to be there with the person, to support them, to be present with them, and not trying to impose your values and your belief system on that person. Be your belief system about anything.
Mhm.
And for me, it's very important. The world today is very divided into, I believe, more than two camps, but there are basically in the Western world two camps, and they are at war with each other. And it's not easy for a therapist not to take side, but it's important for you to be aware in therapy if you are taking sides or not. You have to be aware of what you're doing internally when you are seeing a client in front of you who believes in a completely different world than you do. That's not easy. That's what Rogers talked about. Rogers once saw someone's labeled schizophrenic, and he was able to get so much into the person's world that he felt afraid that he would lose himself. That where came the idea of as if. When I am empathic to the other person, it is as if I am the other person, but without losing contact with the other person. That is very important. That it's important to learn that. you know. How can I be close to you in the position of as if I am you?
Antonio, I was
Yes.
when I think of that, I think about how dangerous empathy is in the sense for the therapist. You have to be ready
Mm,
to go in and engage a person that might be in extreme pain. That is not
yes.
that I mean that's a risky thing because you can get
Yes.
burned in the process. And to be
Yes.
aware of that is important.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why we focus on this training on the therapist also, not only learning uh, deeply about the person-centered approach, but also examining yourself. Who are you? What you doing? What's going on with your life? You know, what is happening with you? How your beliefs, your ideas impact your therapy? Are you able to be present, as Doug said, when the pain is so high? And that, I believe, is the development of the therapist's resilience. Mm.
Mhm.
And we hope and we work towards that in our training. So I think therapy is there is a very interesting aspect that comes out often in therapy. Therapy to me is more about internal changes than external movement. What I mean by that, internal change means you become more relaxed, you become more comfortable with yourself, you
Mhm.
become you let your wisdom, your uh, ability to communicate with other people increases. You know,
Mhm.
you become more forthcoming, you become more congruent, you are able to be more empathic. You know. The external movement is simple. I get a different job. I get a new partner. You know, I am doing things differently. So, but clients often are very focused on the external movement. And some of them come to you and say, well, I'm not changing at all. I'm not doing anything different. And but sometimes they realize that is not doing is by being is what life is, what matters in life. What's matter is not what happened to your life. It's matter how you respond to your life, you know. And sometimes the uh, clients leave therapy prematurely because uh, they are focused on external change. Like you have a couple, they are fighting a lot, you know, and you talk with them, uh, like in couples therapy. I sometimes I teach people how to listen, how active listening, and it's the most difficult thing for them to actively listen because when your emotions hijack your mind, it's very difficult for you to active listening. And that's what happens often in couples therapy. Mm. And the person-centered approach is being confused because it's simple but not easy to apply, as Patricia had said. It's not easy to apply in therapy, to be there present, to be there with your whole, as Roger used to say, giving 100% of your attention to the client. That's not easy because your mind goes everywhere. It's like meditation. You sit in 1 minute in silence, your mind goes everywhere, travels everywhere. And that's meditation. In a way, therapy is about meditation. You know? I have worked with meditation many years. I went from 1 day to 3 years in silence. And I know how the mind works, you know. The mind can go completely crazy. And what really helps is if you have a trust that life in some way, some other way, things are going to work out, even when things are really terrible. And that is inspiring because I have seen so many changes in my clients, you know, and and it's really inspiring to see other people change, you know, because then you look at yourself. What am I doing with my life? You know, ask yourself right now, what are you doing with your life? Are you just following what you taught from your religion, from your country, from your psychotherapy training before? What are you doing with your practice? What are you doing as a therapist? Question yourself deeply because that's going to help you as it has helped me. My retreats in silence was that questioning, that quest to try to understand a little bit about the mind, how the mind functions, how the mind works. So our goal with our students to inspire our students to do therapy, because therapy is never going to go away. There is no bot that's going to be substitute for human contact. No AI. AI can treat, I used to say, AI can treat another AI. That would be fantastic, when we have one robot treating each other, that will work. You know. But this cross between AI and humans, we have to be very careful. AI is a tool,
Yeah.
is
AI
not
can be AI can be incredibly empathic, but very
yes,
superficial.
very superficial. So AI is a tool, it's not a person. Remember that. And AI, if you understand about delusion, AI is often deluded by your own questionings, by your own prompts, as we say in AI words. So that's, is there anyone who would like to say something, any question or any comment?
I have an observation in terms of one of the issues that I've noted is the question about the efficacy of the approach. Does it work? And I think that's a very incredibly difficult question to answer because I think part of the issue is we allow people to get deeper into their pain, which may not be seen as growth by others. Growth is seen as moving away, where it might be growth will occur if I get deeper into my pain and find out how much agony I have and then start moving out of it. And because of that, how do you measure that? I mean, you can measure the pain, but then you have to say, well, they're not being successful. They're supposed to be alleviating pain, not increasing it, so to speak.
Yes, yeah,
And I think that that creates a something of a problem when we're trying to say the person-centered approach works. It works if you understand the person becoming more open to their experience and that the therapist is with them.
yes, yeah. um, Yeah, I think that's a very important aspect in the way that the person-centered approach works. And because it's so simple to help people to experience deeply what they're going through, that is interpreting as interpret and has been misinterpreted the person-centered approach from many times, many universities and all over the world. You know, the idea that the person-centered approach is just repeating what the other person says, and it's not that. If you learn person-centered approach from the books, you might get that interpretation. But once you go to a training, our hope is that you leave that interpretation aside. And one aspect of our training is about uh, understanding deeply what the person-centered approach is, and then you can branch out. That's our idea, is that we need to understand the basics deeply of the person-centered approach so that if you feel like, and sometimes you do use your creativity that comes in therapy, that you might use technique or something like that, you know, whatever that is, you know. And but you are basically have a deep understanding of the person-centered approach. I learned a lot from Gendley on that sense. Gendley once told me that he was basically person-centered, and that he would use focusing, but in the moment that we realized that they were not going anywhere, he would he'd go back to be person-centered. I think that's a very important process. If you are going to apply any technique in your therapy, doing person-centered therapy, is that in the deep sense, you're gonna whenever we apply a technique, we are leaving the person-centered approach and get into a different approach. And it's okay to do it. You can go back and forth from the person-centered approach to other approaches, but you have to be careful in doing that. What I have seen is when I applied something where I get out of the deep beliefs about the person-centered approach, because the person-centered approach is about the client having all the power, all the creativity, all the energy to change their lives. And what you need to do is just to be there in a relationship of trust, of presence. You know, when you when you apply a technique, you go out of that belief. It's okay, but you have to be very careful in that moment to drop whatever you're trying to do at that moment and come back to be person-centered. Yes, Jamil. Mhm.
Um, Doug, I've often wondered the same thing. Something I get the suspicion that our culture tends to maybe pathologize this answer to a degree where I guess it works for them to the whole. Um, and in my experience, I've found a person-centered approach applied to myself and the clients I work with, opening up to a more maybe more truth of self or one's experience comes with a kind of increased awareness and maybe pain. But
Mhm.
I find that I find that it seems the best I can offer myself and someone else is the opportunity to maybe ride the wave or surf the wave of life. Uh, I think of the organism and nature of all this stuff. It's really non-linear, and I think I don't know. Again, the way I think about it is just sort of being able to ride the surface wave of
Yeah.
difference and varieties.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Someone has their hands up. Okay. Yes. Go ahead,
Uh,
Alessandra.
I, I want to thank you. What you said about techniques helped me a lot to understand. I have been like thinking about that, and I want to share that and ask you like, for me it's like an invitation to play, kind of like I invite you to let's experiment this, and like a little gestalt experiment or Gendlin
Yes.
with the body, whatever. And very important for me, like an invitation, like, do you want to come here and let's play here and see what happened and what experience we get, and then go to the again to the listening and to the
Yes.
That's but listening to you helped me because I have that question before. Like I like to play with little techniques here and
Sure.
there.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm getting out of the person approach. I have that question before a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems that we have faced in the person-centered approach everywhere is that people think that if you are doing something, you're not, you're not applying the person-centered approach. That the person-centered therapist has to do specific things to be a person-centered therapist, and that's not the approach that we know about Rogers. Rogers is about you developing yourself, being creative, being with yourself, and moving from that. You know, and that's very important. Yes, Daksha.
Hi. Sorry, I haven't
Hi.
in Hi, sorry, I haven't introduced myself before. Um, just a quick note, I'm here to get to know more about the approach, but I'm a little bit familiar with that as a client in therapy, since my therapist is applying this approach as well, and she's a big admirer of Carl Rogers' work. And I've got a question. About can you probably give us a view that Carl Rogers had on PTSD, on treating PTSD? Because right now there are so many approaches, like for example like protocol specific EMDR, ITTP and stuff like that, when like there is a perspective that the client really has a problem that he's not able to cope with, and these tools help to do that. And am I understanding correctly that person-centered approach is viewing that as something that client itself the client can heal himself or herself by connecting to the wholesome part of oneself, or is there something else that I'm probably not familiar with?
Oh, that's a good question. The first thing is the person-centered psychotherapy doesn't treat disease. It relates to a person. It's a deep relationship with a person. And we have realized about the ideas of magical moments or moments of movement that Rogers talks about, is that once I join you deeply in philosophical, spiritual terms, when I become one with you, then healing happens. That's about healing in therapy. Now, it doesn't mean if you're working on the person-centered approach that if in the moment there appears anything from what you have learned on other approaches, you cannot apply, as we have been talking.
Yes,
And
as you
you
said,
have,
sorry.
go ahead.
As you said, there is just this very, you have to be careful when switching approaches.
Yes, exactly. Because in that moment, the client has to be 100% with you.
Mhm.
And the therapist can notice that by facial expressions, by words. If you propose some, like Alessandra said, if you propose a play with the client has to agree 100% with that play, or it's not going to happen. No. So that's where you have to be careful. Because I have said something to the client was not, uh, oh, yeah, no, no. He was in doubt. So you better abandon that, you know. And that remember, the person-centered approach is not about fixing anyone. Oh, you have PTSD, let me fix you. That's not the person-centered approach. I have worked with a good amount of people with PTSD. You know, I have used other things that I learned in other approach to deal with certain aspects of the treatment of the relationship, you know, but deeply down, what really counts in therapy, if you are able to be 100% present, you are able to not impose your beliefs, your ideas in the client, and if you are able to really listen carefully, and so that the environment of trust, the relationship becomes a womb where the person can really grow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a question as well? I have
Yeah,
had.
for sure. You can ask them any question you want.
Uh, yes, my name is Zofia. I'm also here to learn more about the approach because I want to do a course with you. And my question was, if we're not taking our beliefs, if we're saying we don't try to change the client, we don't try to impose anything on them, what if what the client thinks is fundamentally different from, if a client thinks it's okay to beat up his children, and but we still rely on a humanistic approach and a humanistic framework of beliefs. We can't pretend that it's okay. So what do we do in this setting, in this situation?
Well, nobody's saying it's okay. The person-centered approach didn't say it's okay. You know, uh, the person-centered approach is about exploring what they're doing, not about telling them what to do. And when they deeply explore what they're doing, they begin to rethink what they're doing. You know,
Hopefully, yeah.
I said, well, I can say to a client like that, well, it seems that you're uh, hitting your children is because you believe that they're gonna grow up and they're gonna be good people. Is that what you believe as you do that? Mhm. And then they begin to rethink, you know, and and then they can mention something like guilt. I said, whoa, when you hit your kids, you feel guilt, so you feel a lot of pain. Is that what happened? You know, I don't need to tell them what to do. They know what they're doing. I need
Thank you.
to help them to question and to realize what's going on. Now, do I believe that that's the best way to raise children? No, I do not. No. But some parents use it, you know. And sometimes I can even say, oh, it seems that you are trying to get to have a beautiful child, but who is afraid. Is that what you're trying to do? So, no, no, I don't want my child to be afraid. Oh, okay. So do you think by hitting them, they're not going to be afraid? Oh, yes, yeah. So they begin to realize it.
It's also has struck me that the approach emphasizes warmth. If I'm bringing my warmth into this situation with somebody that's abusive, I trust that the warmth is actually going to have an impact on them and that they will themselves move in a positive direction. If they move in the positive direction, they will find ways to relate differently to their own children.
Yes.
I can't tell them how to do that. I don't have a clue how that happens, but I just trust that what we offer has a positive impact on people.
Well, the quality of your relationship with your client is very important. If you're criticizing them If you're attacking them, you are in trouble, you and the client. One thing, for example, about abuse is that people want to come for therapy, mainly in the US. You have an ethical code that the client should be aware, you know, often. If they are sexually abusing a minor, you have to report them. That's a limitation that we have in therapy. And but you have to be very careful with that, you know. You have to treat that very carefully with a lot of tenderness. It's like I had a client who was suicidal. She came to me and I I said to her, "Do you believe you are safe alone? Can we have a plan?" She said, "No, I'm not safe." I said, "Do you have someone in your family who can accompany you in those few days?" She said, "No, I don't want to talk to my family about it." So the option was, because if she get out of my office and kill herself, everybody would be in trouble, including myself. So I asked her, "How about if we go to a hospital?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "So I would have to call the police because how we do the things here in the States." So I called the police. The police was there and she agreed with it and she went to the hospital. She was put on what we call 5150, with a hold for 72 hours, you know. So, but she made the decision. I didn't make the decision for her. I just offer her some options of what was going on because I knew if she left the office, she was going to kill herself. And she was not playing with it, you know. She was really useful. So she stayed more than a week in the hospital, and she would call me from the hospital and say how she was doing. And finally, she left, you know, the hospital. So we are working with a complex job. It's our therapist. That's why we need to have our philosophical, psychological, spiritual, and I would say social development. Philosophical is to understand the deep meanings of life and psychology and poetry and creativity. Psychological development is about us being aware, understanding our ideas, our beliefs, our values. And social development has to do with our ability to be in community, contact with people, contact with others, being able to participate in a community, in any community. I used to say that I can go in any church because I don't have a religion, but I am spiritual, so I can go anywhere if they accept me. I can go to the synagogue, I can go to a cathedral. Mm. Yes, Sandra, you have a question.
Yeah, also about approaches and techniques. My first preparation was in fundamental person-centered approach, but the second one was in the so-called clinical branch of client-centered approach based on works of Wolfgang Keil and Sylvia Keil. And if you are familiar with this branch of client-centered approach, do you personally still consider it a person-centered approach or not? Because sometimes during my practice, I feel this inner conflict between like fundamental approach and this clinical branch. And I would like to know your opinion if you have one.
Well, anything you do that goes away from the base of the person-centered approach, you can call it what name you want to. But if you leave the basics, you know, the ability that you have to be empathic, to be present with the person, and not telling the person what to do, not, you know, that is very important. If you go into some approach that is telling you you have to do things this way or that way, it's okay, but you have to go back to that so that you recover your freedom and your creativity in therapy. Whatever that is, I'm not familiar with what you're talking, but it's uh, that's why we teach the person-centered approach as we believe Rogers intended it to be. You know. We are very religious to the person-centered approach, to the basics, to the theory of personality, you know, to the six conditions. We are very tuned into that in our training. And you developing as a person and be comfortable with yourself. And then you can apply anything, you know, if it makes sense. I would say in therapy, when I apply something that takes me out of the person-centered approach, I make sure that that is coming out of the moment. It's not something I came prepared to do. I came here prepared to, you know, apply any technique, you know, like, you know, empty chair or whatever, you know, analyze your thoughts pattern, you know. But if that comes out of the moment, then I think it's worthwhile to bring it forth in therapy and see if the client is in tune with that. If the client's not in tune with it, it's your own desire, your own is it was not born out of the encounter. When it's born really out of the encounter, it makes sense to client and therapists. Yes, you're mute.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's
Have
okay.
worked in different settings, especially when I work at in jails in Ontario, here in Canada, with people highly cognitive behavior, kind of blah blah blah. I
Yes.
think the thing is, wherever we work, it's important, and it was important for me. I had so strong in me already the education, all the education and the many contacts and formal and informal education, person-centered approach I received in Brazil. It was so strong that I could go to those sets. I was able to be in those settings. And sometimes, yeah, use whatever they want me to use these or that techniques, but I never lost who I was. I knew who I was in any
and I think that's the important thing, as you said. I think it's the basic is that you have that strong, you know who you are, what you believe, what you're there to do. So, okay, well, but you might work with one technical test or whatever, but
Hmm.
but I know my vision of the client on that, how I see them. The
Yes,
relationship is what it's important, and that kind of connection. And so never lose w- what you know it's important, no matter,
yes, yeah.
right?
Hmm. I think one of the important thing in any setting, if the person feels that you are listening to them, if you are understanding them, if they feel understood, because that puts us in the same race, human race. It takes you out of the prison and you're relating to a person.
Hmm. Yeah, yes. And then
Relating to a
that was
person, yeah,
exactly the feeling that many of them had. And I heard, I heard a number of times, I can't believe I am in prison and I've never felt so free in my life because it
yeah,
was the internal freedom. It
yeah,
was the,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I had a client this week, I think, or last week. She came in therapy and she was talking about herself and all that. Suddenly she said, "Oh my God, I realized I can talk about anything here. I can use any word." And she would use words that would be
Mhm.
uh, uh, like a scene in her
Mm.
family. No,
Mhm.
she could say, "I'm fuck you. I will." She felt free to say anything.
Mhm.
And that's what I know that therapy in that moment is really working.
Mhm.
And the person is being listened to. It's
Mhm.
not being attacked, not being criticized, not being pointed.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yes, Jamil.
So I'm curious what anybody has to say about this. So we're with a pretty high risk population at times, people that have been socialized to be quite violent, gang related activities, stuff like that. People that have killed, people that have been shot at. And I find that a lot of times I'm in a position where I have to, I guess, what would be called psychoeducate the client. Um,
You call
you
what?
know,
What did you say? Psycho
psychoeducation.
psychoeducation. Mm.
It's what I would call it anyway.
Yes, yeah,
What are emotions? What are feelings? How do we respond to them? All this stuff.
yes, yeah.
And
Mm.
and I'm wondering if maybe anyone would think of that, or maybe I'm answering my own question here. Is psychoeducation in and of itself being a kind of technique? Um, yeah, being a kind of I guess what am I trying to say here? I guess it's difficult for me to listen to the rationalization or justification for a very violent act and not have something to say about it
Yeah.
in a more direct way. So yeah,
Yes, yeah, yeah. Well, and that's a very interesting process, is asking yourself how much involved I am that I cannot listen completely to what they're saying. If I am classified as emotional or rational, does that block me from listening to them and try to understand them? How come they are rationalizing? Trying to understand deeply, what's going on here. And the way we do empathic reflections and clarifications is one of way of challenging the client on the things that they are, on their behavior, on their thoughts, on their thinking. But you're not imposing on them, you're just challenging them. If they agree, then you continue. But if they don't, you just let it go, your challenge, and continue listening. And listening, remember, it's active listening. When you don't practice active listening and you stay there in silence, because some people believe that the person-centered approach is about silence. No, it's not about silence. It's about engaging with the client every moment, being able to reflect, to clarify, to listen, to understand. If you see one of the Rogers demonstrations, he's completely there. He's reflecting everything the person is telling him, catching all what is coming to him, be it expressed in words and feelings, or sometimes unexpressed feelings and words. So it's about engagement. Because if you are a therapist, you stay on your mind, and that's part of our training here, you get lost with so many ideas, so many things. As I learned that also with Gandlin once, he told me that he would allow everything to come to his mind in therapy. But if it did not make sense, he would let them go. He wouldn't hold on them and trying to be coming back to the client, coming back to the client often. Music, for music to be played and created, you need rhythm. A therapy session needs rhythm. And silence has to be part of that rhythm for sure. But it cannot be too long or too short. You have to find that movement with your client, because every client has different way of moving. So pay attention to that when you're doing therapy, because that can help a lot. And it's important to try not to disengage, but to be engaged 100% with someone in front of you. So as we all know, Rogers was one of the founders of the basically the father of the person-centered approach, one of the founders of humanist psychology with Maslow. And Roger discovered that the focus of the therapy is on the relationship. That quality of relationship is catalyst to change. It's when you can become yourself with all incongruence that you have, with everything that you have, and with all your congruences or incongruence. That's what's important to understand the philosophy of the person-centered approach, the theory of personality, because the person-centered approach is very consistent from the beginning to the end. very consistent. Rogers really built something very consistent. And a lot of research has done about the person-centered approach. We have had, Rogers was on the first psychologist to do research. When some people said that the person-centered psychotherapy is not evidence-based, it's because they missed all the research that has been done. Rogers started it. He was concerned about science also, Rogers. As we said, he was the first psychologist to be concerned about research. He would tape session with clients, would go back, analyze, and see what was going on. So that's why the person-centered approach was born. It was born from directly from the client, and not Rogers didn't have a hypothesis on his mind and build a theory like other people have done. He went into the field, and there he brought about this whole process of therapy. And we have seen here that how the person-centered psychotherapy or client-centered therapy, as was called at the beginning, was branched out to education, to organizations, and even in political settings that Rogers has worked with politicians and in peace projects. So I think our program is it's I think it's very unique in the sense that it brings uh, a lot of experience, as Robert have said before. You know, we have a lot of practice, a lot of triads, dyads, group practice, supervision, and we do it online. Basically online this one, and it we have had this experience, as we said, since the COVID-19 of doing the training online. And sometimes we do it face to face, as we did in Russia. And we are going to do it in India at the end of I think it's the end of October. They're going to have a conference there on the person-centered approach. And after the conference, we're going to do uh, an introduction to our course, the first module. And all the training is recorded, and you can get information, you can get the recordings of it. We just ask not to transfer this recording to anybody else, because it's a question of the group. And sometimes people don't want to be recorded in certain aspects and we respect that. And if the person don't want to be recorded, they can close their camera. So